Hello, and welcome
Hey,
back to another Breathe Pulse. My name is Davis. Sorry we missed you last week, but we're back this week with possibly our best pulse yet. We have three of Pittsburgh's original slackliners, you might call them OGs. They have put in more hours than they'd like to admit in cultivating a community around slacklining in Pittsburgh. And we have no plan other than to get these three boys in a room and start a conversation. So, Wade, would you like to introduce yourself and give us a little background and maybe 5 minutes of rambling, and we can go from there?
I'd love to.
Great.
So
Thank
I'm
you.
Wade. I hope I've met some of the people that are watching this. And I'm, like Davis said, one of the people that's really been impassioned by Pittsburgh and Slackline and just really been energized to sort of meld those two things together. And I think one of the things that we talked about in preparation for sort of having this little talk was what was the best thing we could offer from the experience we've had here in Pittsburgh to everyone that's listening to this. And I think when I think back at specifically the past 4 years of what has evolved in Pittsburgh in terms of slacklining, I just feel a sense of gratitude, and that comes from essentially how much has blossomed here. So there is an unlimited number of things that I think you can sort of attribute to why a slackline community might take off. And I think it's sort of undeniable that there are definitely places within the United States and throughout the world in which slackline communities really take hold. Very commonly, it seems to happen in cities. And I think it's pretty identifiable to sort of identify individual things that contribute to that success. So we really thought about what, if you had to boil it down and say, what were the three things that really helped us in Pittsburgh specifically, we came to this idea that number one, sort of the access that we have and the availability of being able to practice slackline was an enormous contributor to the success. Another one being very specifically an online presence, some contributions of social media, digital content, essentially, an online presence. And then lastly, just, and this is sort of ambiguous, but community, something to encourage people to want to come together to do something, because you can have a ton of people that want to do something separately, but something about doing it together and whatever encourages that very much accelerates more people doing it. So we wanted to try to isolate those three things specifically today or tonight. And we were really interested to hear from whoever's listening to this on anything that, first off, outside of those three things that you really feel strongly contributed to success that you've witnessed. But maybe out of just those three things, what do you think is the most successful in the communities that you've participated in or borne witness to? And again, those three things being the access, online presence, and essentially fostering community. So I think the first place we can probably start, I think that's the simplest, and it's maybe actually a little bit of a hot here in Pittsburgh, because just today we have a bit of news in terms of this, but something we're really proud of, I think, here is our access. We're called the Paris of Appalachia, and I think and we're called the City of Bridges, and that has a lot to do with the topography of Pittsburgh. So Travis has a background specifically in geology. I think, if you want to speak at all to things like how that scarp that, very classically, one of our classic lines in Pittsburgh takes place on a scarp on the hillside, and it has a lot to do with our topography and the geology of the region. So Travis, do you have
yeah,
anything to sort of pitch in that department?
yeah. As a geologist, um, so Pittsburgh and really the Appalachian Plateau, it is a plateau. It's a flat. It's completely flat, but it's been eroded over like a few million years or more. And that erosion is it creates all the valleys and hollers and canyons and things that we can typically slackline across. We don't have any cool igneous provinces or any like big mountain rock faces or anything unless you move out east towards West Virginia, Maryland. So where we are is it's geologically flat. It's just been eroded down, and so some of our best spots are erosion features, which is great for these big, scarps or landslide faces. But at the same time, it creates a lot of anchor issues or challenges because oftentimes the anchors are trees that are themselves on a precarious perch on the side of a mountain or side of a really landslide area. And so a lot of the challenges are related to that. But then again, you also have these awesome shaded little valleys and canyons and things that you can rig across.
I mean, we got trees. We're wrapping old railroad steel. I don't even know what they are exactly. Steel rails for the trains were on. You have to get very creative, and there's not like these super obvious massive cliff faces. We don't have those extremely vertical heights to work with. So we're kind of working in those hills and those shaded areas. You kind of got to get creative and look for just the opportunities aren't as obvious, but the ones that we found they've been really close to the city, which has just been really fortunate, really amazing. And it almost feels better when you do find them because they are a little bit, more rare. And Travis has found Emerald, classic, one of the best lines in Pittsburgh. Doesn't jump out as a place that you would just like, oh, we could set a highline up there, or midline up there. But once you get up there and walk in it and like observe it, and you get the city in the background. So simply amazing.
So I think that's one of the things about Pittsburgh is in terms of access, we have proximity to it. So you can have access in being able to easily drive somewhere, but we live within this topography. So something the city did a while back that was incredibly awesome was they created something called greenways, which are protected green spaces in the city. Usually they're on these huge hillsides because you can't use the hills for anything else, so why not just leave it for the wildlife? And as a result, we have enormous amounts of green area actually in the proper city air, downtown and in around those areas. So being able to just very quickly from any part of town go to somewhere that's like that and also has the big hillsides, has created for, very specifically here, going to maybe 3 or 4 of the same places over and over again. So coming back to one of the points we were talking about earlier, and there being a hot topic that just came up today, one of our most trafficked areas in Pittsburgh that you may have heard of or seen pictures through our social media is something called Seldom Seen Greenway, one of those protected green spaces. And there's an active trainway that for the past 4 to 5 years has been incredibly hospitable to slackliners in the green space. And part of the anchors actually were on the concrete abutments and trestles of that railway. And this was well known by many of the operators, mechanics, and engineers of the train company. They would stop
and watch us.
They'd stop their trains, they'd get off, they'd break their schedule to come and ask us questions and watch us and hang out. Because just like most people that you probably encounter in your practices with Slackline, 99% of people are always curious and they're always seemingly supportive. And these train operators were no different. But then just this morning, for the first time ever, someone said to someone who was rigged there, you need to take this down. This isn't legal. They had no specific ordinance or code to cite. Simply, it was the usual circumstance of fear the unknown. I don't know what this is. Get it out of here. And so now we're left in a position as a community here in Pittsburgh where we're scrambling to figure out what to do, because this place where we've introduced literally hundreds of new slackliners to their first midlines or highlines is now completely inaccessible to us in some sense. I don't know if anyone else out there has experienced loss of a highline. That's a very unique process that we're going to only continue to go through as a community, and not just with highlines, but with slacklines as well. There's another common park a state park within the city here in Pittsburgh. That at one point it was sort of ambiguous. You could put your slack lines and hammocks up on the trees in the park, but now it's just a flat no. And it's very difficult to work with state government, even more difficult than it is to already work with municipal local government. So now we also have to deal with the loss of low lines and just beginner lines for people who would otherwise be very easily able to enter the sport. It's a whole new challenge, very unique challenge.
Yeah, so
But
finding.
that's good.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Travis.
So it's good to get kicked out though, because that was it. Invention is the mother, or no?
Necessity is the mother of invention.
There you go. Necessity is the mother of all invention. If you get kicked out of a place, that just forces you to look elsewhere, like across the river where Market Street Pier is. And what do you know? There's a 140-foot water line right there for the taking.
Beautiful line.
I feel like the process of finding and possibly getting asked to leave is just unavoidable because slacklining is so new and a lot of people unfortunately haven't seen it, that it seems very strange possibly. And if done incorrectly, it can damage trees, it can damage other things without a doubt. So doing it responsibly, especially because it's so new, is really important. And how you carry yourself and address people if they were to come and ask you to take it down. I know it's frustrating, but not trying to be snarky or trying to fight it might sometimes is better to listen to them, and for that time, just take it down. Like today, I mean, I wasn't there, but Brad, who was there, just, started to take it down, which is really unfortunate. But I think as any sport that's growing, it's important that we carry ourselves with, caution, but also with respect for these people that might be asking us, unfortunately, to take it down in the future.
Yeah, and to kind of put that into a brighter light, or at least look at it from a different perspective, as someone who's kind of seen a couple different communities grow and progress and get bigger, this is just like a natural part of that progression, right? Like as more and more Pittsburgh slackliners are getting on the Facebook pages and are getting out and slacklining, like you're just bound to, it's just a numbers game, right? And at some point, someone's going to get shut down somewhere. And so in a certain way, like it's a testament to the community that's growing here, which is cool.
And in another realm of access, it's something that I was hoping that we could hint on today. There is what's I think the testament to why we have been successful specifically with somewhere like Seldom Seen for 4 years without an issue is that there is within Pittsburgh very much a culture that is supportive of outdoor recreation, in that there seems to be if you're doing something outside and you're not hurting someone, you're not breaking any laws, then you are a good person. It seems, at least from my perspective, it seems like every kind of outdoor recreation that you can do in this city is going to be supported. And so whenever most circumstances of when we are in parks, we have these unfortunate handful of circumstances or events that we were kicked out, but the vast majority are people that approach us or officials that approach us or even the police approaching us in curiosity, support, just general happiness that someone is doing something like that in the city that they also live in. I think Market Street Pier is one of the most unusual places in terms of exposure, because we always talk about exposure on slacklines, height and all of these kinds of things, but when you're on a line like Market Street Pier, you're completely at the mercy of the public, and that includes authority figures. So I don't know about you guys, Bronson and Travis and Davis, if you've been on that line, but I get on that line and suddenly my fears are reflections of what I think people might be thinking about me or what they might do or what they might say. A really good example being one time Bronson was on that line and there was this very overweight biker dude who was like, what if I just shook the line and knocked him off? And I was like, oh, you don't want to do that. So now those kinds of things run through my mind on something that has this kind of public exposure and brings all these things to mind, like Bronson was hinting at, where, okay, if I have to talk to someone, how am I going to act? What am I going to say? It's a very complex game.
And Sean, I saw your comment, and we actually talked about Chicago, the Slackline crew there before we went live here, just commenting that it's crazy. It's awesome that Chicago might not have, these super huge lines with, it's not Yosemite or something like that. But that small group, through regular meetups, through, just being able to reach out to people, form like a really solid group that, like, that in itself, I mean, that's what, to me, is what it's all about. And like, my answer to which of the three is the most important, to me, it's the community aspect, because without, you can build the community, you can build the online presence with limited access, right? If you have better access, that's just even better. So I just wanted to totally agree with you, Sean, and that is awesome what you guys have going on over in Chicago.
I mean, that's a perfect segue, I think, to transition and talk a little bit about how community has shaped, Pittsburgh specifically. But again, if anyone else has any bits of insight or wisdom to how they've witnessed community increase the prevalence of slackline and the practice of slackline in and around their lives, we'd love to hear it. One thing, that you said, Sean and Bronson, you highlighted, was the regular meetups. That's another common feature that you'll see in so many different cities that you go to that have a slackline community. And there seems to always be some sort of stomping ground or ground zero or a place that just is the place where you go to put up the beginner lines, the primitive lines, the 2-inch lines. Here in Pittsburgh, we have a place called Dippy. It's right outside of one of the Carnegie libraries in Oakland, which is right next to the University of Pittsburgh. So another common feature that I've noticed is a lot of these places where meetups occur happen to be outside of educational institutions. So I get this sense of pride with Slackline, where I like to think of it as if, 2,000 years from now, historians were to look back, we would be those little monkeys on their little, Renaissance paintings or whatever that are next to the people reading the books. And it's to some degree, it's an intellectual pursuit, and it's part of a cultural renaissance that we're living through right now. We really are. And I think the locations that, at least again, that I've seen, they reflect that. It's all these people meeting together in a place where they feel comfortable doing something like this. It just fosters the regularity of those meetups so much more. I'm really interested to know where Chicago, I mean, I have not been to Chicago. I've been to Chicago once, and it was like I landed in the airport, went outside, came back in kind of thing. So I'd love to know what the setting is for the incredible amount of success that I've witnessed from afar. Another place I can speak to from personal experience is Austin. Austin, Texas has a ridiculously incredible slackline community, and they have an unbelievable place called Zilker that is just this perfect place for people to meet up and just do this thing. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh my, it all crystallized. I was like, oh my gosh, there is this in every city. It's just there.
The boardwalk.
Yeah, the
Austin.
boardwalk. Yeah.
The local slackline watering hole, if you will.
I mean, Dippy here at the Carnegie Library, that's like, at least to me, and I know for a lot of other slackliners in Pittsburgh, it was like the birthplace of a lot of relationships, a lot of skills. That's where I actually learned to stand on a line and made a lot of friends there. And it all started with regular meetups. Almost every Sunday it was. I guess people were started to go there in between those days, of course, but it was just like a known thing. Sundays, let's go, Dippy. And it was awesome.
Dippy is a Diplodocus dinosaur. If you could use his real name, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah. I didn't even know the whole name. I just knew Dippy. Diplodocus? Is that what?
He's Diplodocus.
For anyone, there's a huge life-size dinosaur statue right next to this, area outside the library where everyone has these meetups. And like many other meetups, it's not just slackline. There's acro, there's jugglers. One of the best quotes I've ever heard from, a slackliner, I don't even remember exactly who it was, and I don't even remember exactly how it went, but essentially it's that slackline is bringing the circus home. And there's a lot of ways that you can just take all these different, we call them flow arts in our community because we're really proud of them, but to be honest, a lot of them boil down to circus life that we've been having in various circumstances for thousands of years. And it's really true. Slackline lets someone take this practice of funambulism and bring it home, and be able to do it with other people is really special.
For sure. So while we're talking about community, it's making me feel just like really honored to be in the room with you guys, because I think a part of cultivating that community, it definitely takes like a handful of people to start to cultivate, and it takes that like dedicated slackliner that starts posting on the internet, I'm gonna be at Dippy on Sunday, and like no one comes for 2 months, and then like someone finally comes, and it takes like a like a dedicated slackliner, like a catalyst, like that leader of the group, and you three are definitely a part of that in Pittsburgh. And another like feeling I'm getting is like this almost feels like a call to action. If you're watching at home and there's not a group of slackliners around you going out to meet every week, you have that opportunity to make that community and to start to cultivate it. And it's kind of a really special thing because slacklining is so new. If you get into something like mountain biking, like you don't have the opportunity to like cultivate a community from ground up as easily as you would in slacklining. And so, yeah, I think it's just really special that I was able to wrangle all three of you in a room together. So thank you for being here. And if you're at home and you're wanting to start a community, or if you're having feelings of loneliness while you're on the slackline and you want more friends, these are three people that can really guide you along that path. And so if you have any questions right now, feel free to type them in. Or I'm also willing to bet that any one of these three pals would be willing to have a phone call conversation with you, or an Instagram DM or whatever. And so reach out afterwards.
Yeah, I think the best free tool right now that's out there is Facebook groups. That's kind of how Steel City Slackers really started, because there was a Slackline Pittsburgh Facebook group. And when I was first, getting into slacklining, I would post in that group. Nobody would come. No one would respond. And it was kind of for Travis Wood. Yeah, you and Darcy were like the only ones. But that's the thing. I was like, realized there are other slackliners around here. Just for whatever reason, like they're just not coming, or maybe they're not seeing the message. I don't know. So then I just started at the time a very, very small, seemingly benign Facebook group, Steel City Slackers. I like the little alliterations. I was like, okay, it has a good ring to it. And then and from there, that's where the people who are actually serious about it and actually passionate about it, that's where people went. And then that became kind of a thing of its own, and that grew. And from there, more and more people just started joining. And anyways, go back to the main point. I think just by starting a Facebook group for your area, and then when people obviously invite your friends, invite people that are into it already, and then out of every 100 people, 10 people might stop and be like, oh, that's cool. From those 10 people, one person might actually want to try. Tell the 10 people that stop about the group. Definitely tell the one person that wants to try. And then of the 10 people that join the group, maybe like one of them, whatever, will actually start coming. But I mean, that's kind of what it takes. And over time, like people will just start showing up. And then, so yeah.
That's definitely a great insight. A local Facebook group acts as like a little social business card to where someone's like, how do I do this? You're like, oh, you just go here, as opposed to like, okay, you're going to go to Facebook, then go to Slack chat. You're going to add it. Now you're going to scroll through for 5 hours. Like it acts as just like a nice, gathering.
And I know Chicago used meetups, which is great because there's people looking for shared interest groups when they go on that site. Whereas Facebook, like people are less likely to find that on their own. That's where you kind of have to like tell them about it when they ask. But Meetup is also a great option because people will find it on their own, and you won't need to do that kind of like telling people about it. I can't remember what it costs. I know it's a small amount. It's some small yearly amount, but yeah, it's another great option out there.
Something we did in Pittsburgh that I really believe made a huge difference in terms of specifically the Facebook thing and the online presence is we forwarded slacklinepittsburgh.com. We got that domain through Google. It was like $3 every, I don't remember. It was cheap. And and we've just forwarded it straight to the Facebook group, and the Facebook group's public, and it makes it so that even if we meet someone who's like, I don't use Facebook, we're like, you don't need to. Just go to the website, and you can see when everyone's going to meet up, what's happening. You don't need an account. Just look at it, and people would be able to, without feeling like they're going to facebook.com, type this thing in. It's really easy to remember, and just like Davis said, use it as a sort of like a business card to present this unified front. So I think this is a perfect segue to talk about that third element of what really helped propel the success that we had here with our community in Pittsburgh, and that's an online presence. And that sounds sort of trite, I think, because I think it's really easy to just think of online presence like, oh, you're doing Instagram, or you're doing social media. But when I say online presence, I just don't have a better phrase. And I think the way I think about it is there's this really artsy movie called Revolver, in which the whole concept of the movie is that every evil trait can be boiled down to this unified, intangible, single person that exists. And that's essentially what Steel City Slackers turned into. We had all of these incredible, talented slackliners in various arms of their own niches. And Steel City Slackers allowed us to present ourselves as one really professional slackliner that can do anything, a jack of all trades with slackline. And so we were able to then forge relationships with our local climbing gyms, and from there bridge out to other outdoor recreation companies and organizations, and then from there have enough vested interest and relationship in the community to then do things with some of the science centers and libraries in the area. And suddenly, before we knew it, the local children's museum wanted to pay us $200 an hour to teach children how to slackline. So by simply constantly taking all of our efforts and presenting them in a unified way with this online, comprehensive online presence, it allowed our city to have access to us, and to exactly, even that logo is developed, I would say, and Bronson can obviously speak to this because he's the one that developed it, but it's developed in a way that it brings about an instinctual response, right, Bronson?
Yeah, I mean, just when I thought of the word, or thought of the ideas of Pittsburgh and slacklining, that's what kind of formulated. And with just looking at it, and this is, what I believe is a great part of a logo, which is you don't have to ask questions. It just speaks for itself, and it conveys the message. And so when people see it, even if they don't know what Steel City Slackers, even if you don't see the words, Steel City, most people who live here will know it's Pittsburgh related. But just right off the bat, it conveys what we're all about. And I think another part of that, which isn't exactly conveyed in the logo itself, but in what we strive to do, which kind of loops back to the whole community aspect, which is bringing Pittsburgh together using slacklining. So Slackline US, or it's Sonia's project, Crossing Lines. Is that what it is? Crossing Lines. Her mission statement's very similar, like building connections using lines or slack lines. So, I don't really know where I was going with that, but
I like it.
Yeah, it's definitely like a sustaining cycle, right? Like building a community kind of feeds into itself, and then more opportunities come about, which brings more slackliners into the mix. And like more slackliners at this point in the game, at least, is always going to be a good thing, because that brings more money into the field for better gear and access and all this kind of stuff. We talked a little bit about it already. The access at our local highline spot's kind of in jeopardy at the moment. And, like if there were 10,000 slackliners in Pittsburgh, like it'd be a different conversation, right? Like we'd be able to kind of come more correct and be like, look at all these people that do this thing, we're worthy. And so just starting to cultivate the community in and of itself feeds back into it and then makes it better for the rest of us. And I think that's kind of what I was getting out of what you were saying, Bronson. It's just like it's a sustaining cycle, it's like it's a...
Totally.
This is the best way I can describe it.
And Slackline draws... go ahead. Go for it.
I was gonna say the online presence thing. I just wanted to bring up that when you go on Steel State Slackers or the Pittsburgh Slackline group on Facebook, if you have a dumb question or like you're a newbie and you just started, there are so many people that are ready and willing to answer that question, take you seriously, invite you out, make sure that you have a good time, and learn and teach you what types of gear to get, and because we're all trying to foster people that can go out and rig lines so that we can come join them as opposed to us having to carry the gear all the time. So I've been really impressed with the Pittsburgh Slackline group as it's grown, because I've been out of it for a couple of years. But as it's grown, I've continued to watch. Everyone is so helpful and so excited to help new people learn and take them seriously, as opposed to just like, oh, this guy's never going to be good, and we'll just blow him off because he doesn't know what this and this and this is. But yeah, that's something. It's part of the online presence thing. I think that was a big deal to me.
And I think a lot of people, when they think about that word, they think about, oh, you need a website, you need professional photos, which you don't. You don't need all that. You definitely don't. It helps, sure, but it's not required. Like this device nowadays, look at that. Hey, nice sticker there. But that camera in your phone is good enough. Like totally good enough. Unless you have a flip phone. But even then, it's better than nothing. Actually, maybe not. But anyways, you don't need all these advanced things to get started. You totally don't. So if anyone's out there and wanting to form a group in their local area, do the Facebook group, start an Instagram. Maybe at some point when you have a couple people who can pitch a couple dollars, do the meetup. And that in itself will solve itself out. And you definitely, like I said, you don't need to worry about, a website or all these fancy things. So just that word, I feel like, is kind of brings a lot of different meaning behind it, but it doesn't need to be complex. It can be pretty simple if you want it to be.
So it looks like we have a question from Danette, and I think there's a bunch of ways we can sort of answer this, but she's asking, what do we do as a club to help prepare new people to go from park lines to high lines or mid lines? I think the three things that we've been talking about here have really helped us allow new people to get into leashed slack lines. The access that we have just lets us get people to do it more frequently in the city. We can take people on day trips. We don't have to drive on these huge day or weekend trips to be able to do it. The online presence, like what Travis was alluding to, in that we foster this apprenticeship kind of mentorship culture in slacklining. So when people do go to meetups, it's not just like we're meeting up and oh, it's your turn, oh, it's my turn. We're meeting up during rigging, and we're meeting up to share our coffee, and we're talking about how to build this thing, and we're paying attention to each other, and it comes with a lot of humility and learning from everyone. But then I think also we've now very fortunately been able to grow relationships and have multiple ways of bringing new people in. One way, with our local climbing gym here in Pittsburgh, Ascend, we offer workshops pre-COVID, where we would have people come in and we put midlines in the gym, we rigged them with them. Travis, this was what he led up at Ascend, and would take people on top of a top out boulder and show them, hey, this is how you make a bolted anchor, this is why it's safe, this is how you tie in, and just show people so that the first time they show up to a high line outside, they're already so well equipped to look at it, feel safe, know how to mantle and mount and leash climb and all of these things. Ascend and our relationship with the climbing gym has been invaluable. So I often tell people when they're looking to try to really, really expand things in their local community, to immediately reach out to the rock climbing gyms and try to have some kind of cooperative relationship, because for all intents and purposes, slacklining is climbing. I always advertise slacklining as a subdiscipline of climbing. It uses the same approaches, the same terrain and spaces, the same gear, the same techniques with your body. We just primarily end up using our feet without our hands, but my personal experience is that my climbing has improved after becoming better at slacklining. So really, really, really encouraging and with longevity encouraging a relationship with your climbing gym is some way that you can really stand to anchor a community within a community in wherever you're living.
I'll
Um,
add to that. It's nice to have a midline or highline that's about a 100-yard approach total from where you park to where you can leash in.
yeah,
It's
absolutely.
terribly helpful, especially if it's a shorty, like a short 70-foot line.
So Travis and Wade, you two more so than me, because I was in New Jersey at the time, worked with Ascend to get these workshops, which I'm sure there was a lot of things you had to work through. And I'm sure if someone were to go to their local climbing gym, would get asked certain questions. So what were some of the hurdles that you had to jump through that someone else doing the same thing would need to do?
That's a really good question. Yeah, so gosh, I forget if Wade or I reached out first, but we just reached out to the guy that owned the place. And it was just like, hey, we're Steel City Slackers. This is what we do. We've been looking for an indoor location because, it's Pittsburgh and wintertime, kills a lot of highlining events. And we want to foster a relationship, and we maybe teach some workshops or whatever, but let us know what you need from us to make you feel comfortable and what we can do for you. Um, you know, we we're not going to pay for the access, but at the same time, you don't have to pay us to do it. Like what kind of relationship can we build here if we're both trying to get a win-win out of this? And because they were still building the rock gym or climbing gym, we were able to get in there and see where we could put in anchors and see kind of what time and space we would have to work there and make relationships with the owners and explain that maybe we don't have liability insurance per se, but maybe you could you know hire some of us on as employees. There's a number of ways that we tried to get that started up, but they were really, because they were trying to also build a community because they just came to Pittsburgh, and so they were very receptive to letting us show what we could do and really work with them and help make sure the anchors were okay and make sure their climbing walls could support our anchors and stuff. But I don't know, Wade, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I see it as it happened in two phases. I think the first phase was exactly what Travis just described. We reached out. It was that initial preliminary, like just getting to know each other and what can we offer each other kind of thing. And the way I saw it was sort of like, yeah, Steel City Slackers, Slackline community, and Ascend, trying to bridge some sort of compromise in the middle. And that first phase, we didn't really have to worry too much about some of that risk management, liability type thing, because it sort of was umbrellaed under the rock climbing's current policies. We didn't really have to worry too much. But as things evolved, and as there was a clear increasing demand for slackline and proper slackline programming at Ascend, we entered sort of this new phase in where all of leadership in the climbing gym wanted it to be treated more formally. And that involved developing a standard operating procedure for all slackline policies under any Ascend facility, because now Ascend has 2 active facilities and they plan on opening more. They wanted something that they could use no matter where they went. So at that point, at phase 2, that's when they started hiring employees with the explicit purpose of in the future they would serve slackline roles. Very recently, I was actually just officially designated the director of slackline at Ascend. So now we so now we will be, and I've worked for months with our insurance carrier, who is the largest insurance carrier for climbing wall association gyms in the United States. So we're setting precedent for slackline departmental liability and risk management here in Pittsburgh. We had to develop with this insurance carrier these completely new policies and procedures for every single aspect of any kind of slacklining. Midlines and leashed lines, outdoor lines, what would happen if we put a slackline on a climbing guided trip, all of these conditions and circumstances. So developing all of these essentially documents and little tiny details was an enormously labor intensive process. So I think if there is a hope to continue a long-term relationship with a climbing gym, it requires employment. At some point, you have to convince this climbing gym that it's going to be not only in their best interest, in their best interest, but in their customer's best interest, for you to be under their employment. So, in addition to policies and procedures, you'll have to work with numbers. You'll have to essentially justify that you will be able to earn a profit by offering these kinds of programming. So I like to stay optimistic, because our situation happened very positively here in Pittsburgh when I talk to people who want to foster similar relationships with their climbing gym. But I also try to paint a very real picture in that phase 1 of what we had with Ascend allowed us to do some things, but now what we have with phase 2 is near limitless. And the amount of work you have to put in is quite extensive to be able to achieve that. What I will also say is we're very willing to share what we've already built. A lot of what Ascend built their success from was what other gyms shared with them. So if anyone listening has any interest in some of these documents, I'm happy to give you versions in which you can use as the foundation for your policies and procedures. Because ultimately, transparency for this industry that we're like watching evolve and become something, transparency and creating a standard is going to be very important. We have to agree, if I'm a Slackline teacher or I'm a Slackline guide, this is what I would expect to earn, the same way as a rock climbing instructor or a rock climbing guide. So I really love the idea of encouraging an open access to this information, if anyone wants any of it.
And it sounds like a lot of work, and it certainly has been, but that's over the course of 4 years or so, 3 or 4 years. And when Travis sent that initial, what was essentially a cold email, because do you know Paul at the time? Right, so it was essentially an email from someone that he didn't know. Steel City Slackers wasn't really a thing. It was a group. We had
a website.
No, we didn't. We didn't then.
I think
at
we
that
did.
point, no, we didn't. No.
Maybe we didn't.
Not by then. No, because it was Paul. Paul was the one who was like, "Man, you guys should form into a more concise group," and then that's when the whole nonprofit discussion started. Anyways, what started as a cold email snowballed into this much bigger thing. So that's, as from someone who has sent thousands of cold emails, it's so intimidating, scary. Most 99% of the time, you're not going to get an answer, but you will. You will.
Yeah, you're right. That I'm remembering back now, because I remember we had a big meeting at Seldom Seen with the core group of Slackliners. We all stood around a circle. So they're like, "So what are we gonna do? We this would give us access to like an indoor space, and it would be really awesome, and like we could do workshops and stuff. But we have to join we have to make a group." And yeah, and I think that's when Bronson was like, Bronson's like, "We should call it Steel City Slackers." I'm like, yes.
Yeah, and I guess the only reason I point that out is I want to encourage people to, even if you don't know the people at your local climbing gym, it can't hurt to send an email looking for some type of win-win relationship. That is essentially what Travis did, and it's really snowballed into a lot of great things for us, but also for slacklining as a whole, and the slacklining and climbing industry now, with insurance people becoming more informed and aware of what that can look like. So even if you don't have the website, whatever, if it's something that you're looking to do, send that email to the person. I know a lot of ways where you can get people's emails, totally legal, but people might not expect it. Anyways, you can find people's emails through their websites if it's not there. But look for those people and send an email saying, "Hey, I'm so-and-so from this Slackline group. Introduce yourself," and then just kind of go on to say, we would love to search for some win-win relationship. What do you need from us? Like Travis did, which worked really, really well. So I hope if anyone's in a similar place where we were multiple years ago, reach out to your local climbing gym.
I think this serves into a nice segue I've got rumbling around in my mind right now. And it kind of falls along those lines of sending that cold email. And it's something we actually talk a lot about within Breathe. internally is, what's your why? Like, why do you do something? And, to the three of you have put in so many hours into cultivating a community, and had all those hours been spent on projecting the longest line in Pennsylvania, like we'd have a higher length record or whatever, like it's kind of it's very much like a selfless pursuit. And I think like it would provide a lot of value for the people listening at home to hear a little bit about like what's your why, and why would you take time away from your personal slackline progression to build into a community. In other words, let's get touchy-feely.
I'm not the best, certainly not the best slackliner. Definitely not the most intelligent rigger by any means. But what I am good at, really, really good at, is getting other people to slackline. So that, for me, like selfishly, I don't know. I get a lot of enjoyment out of that. So that's kind of been a tool, I guess, for me to be able to share that with more people. So it is selfless, but it's also, I guess, in a sense, selfish because I do enjoy it, but I can justify it because I know it's going to better that person in almost every way.
Bronson introduced me to Slackline.
And now he's way better than me.
For months.
And
For months we climbed together, and you're like, you gotta do this. You're gonna like it, I promise. And I'm like, nah, I'm good. That's fine. You were right, though. You were so right.
I knew it, too. I was like, the way I saw you, how you like knew the climbing gear so well, and just how like you approached climbing. I was like, man, he would get really good really fast.
What about you, Travis? What's your why?
Oh, because it's fun. No, let's see. Started slacklining because I was at geology field camp and we just needed something to do because we couldn't go out climbing. And so we rigged up a slackline, and that was a whole hell of a lot of fun. But I think ultimately it comes down to like my whole, what they call like mission statement for the seven effective whatever stuff they teach in business stuff. But they make you come up with like a personal mission statement. Mine's always been to encourage others to consider the impossible. So one way to do that is to go out in public and like unicycle or slackline or just do something really crazy, but do it really well. And people that are just walking by will look at that and first they'll think you're crazy or whatever, but somebody will consider whatever challenge that they're facing in their life might it's not impossible. You can do anything if you put your mind to it. And to consider the impossible in terms of like creative things you could do, because like rigging up a line across the water from the pier to the sidewalk is something that you wouldn't consider unless you're already in a creative mindset. And then being able to walk it, that's the impossible that you're also doing. So slackline to me is like the epitome of that mission statement.
Can anyone see this picture of Travis on his line with his hunting rifle?
Oh my God. If you are not following one Instagram account, you need to go and follow this man right here and look at the creative nature of each and every slackline post that this guy has. It's incredible. Incredible.
I'm a little disappointed there was no Charlie Horse appearance, but we can move past that.
He's around here somewhere.
I think for me, Sean has a comment here. He said it's a selfishness. That's sort of what it is for me. Like Travis alluded to this creative process with slacklines, and creating a slackline, I like just creative processes in general. It's very, very fulfilling. The catharsis of going through all of this stress and using every aspect of your entire being, and then that rush you get at the completion of it, it's just very life affirming in all of the right ways. And slacklining hits all of the right types of life affirmation that I'm really looking for. But very specifically, the creation of slackline community it's like an endless pursuit, but also constantly providing you results. It's just this flower that continues to blossom and blossom and blossom and blossom and blossom, and it just never ends. It's incredibly unique. So every time I go to a meetup or I'm thinking about having a meetup, it's just this, it's like a feeling of like I'm putting just another drop in the bucket of what is Slackline Pittsburgh and this community we have built year in and year out. One really, really proud thing I think that especially I feel like our community has created is our gathering that we hold every summer. We were supposed to have it here in exactly almost 2 weeks in Pittsburgh. We call it Conflux because the exact center of our city is the confluence of 3 enormous rivers, the Allegheny, the Ohio, and the Monongahela. And all of our best slacklines take place around that conflux of rivers and are all accessible by bike lanes. So for 3 years, we would all come together, rig all of our best lines, and then just spend all day biking and skateboarding and walking between them. And it was incredible. This year, we just can't do it. I mean, it's just not a prudent decision to do in that same way. We hope to do some kind of abridged version, but obviously still can't even, with this few days left, figure out exactly what that's going to be, even in the circumstances of having these ever-changing access issues that we're now facing here in Pittsburgh. So I think overall, I have noticed that a lot of slackliners seem to like to create. They are artists in the sense that they live their lives in a way that they are constantly pleased by aesthetics, they are constantly influenced by culture, they're using their minds, they are self-aware. I mean, this isn't a blanket statement for every slackliner, but especially you can see this at Breathe, where there is a common human element that just, it's the creation of something that we don't even know what it's going to be. And it's very, very satisfying. I don't know if anyone else out there has had any specific experiences with creation and slacklining, but the establishing process is another creation process that we all get really, really a lot of satisfaction out of, very specifically with slacklining. Rigging is a creation process. I don't know, Travis
I
Brunson.
saw Ethan just popped in. He makes multi-$1,000 space nets out of Dyneema, which is no easy task.
Yes, that's true. Which weekend are you talking about, Ethan? What weekend?
I think he's
July
talking
4th.
about Conflux.
Oh, great!
'Cause we
Good
can't-
news.
We can't have it at Seldom Seen anymore, so
No, but that's good news because if we have something at Hayes Woods, that allows much more distance because it's just a much more sprawling space and it's not conducive to like people being right next to each other all day, in and out. So I sort of think. I sort of think Conflux is going to be something like 75 less people at Hayes Woods over Saturday and Sunday. I mean, especially with Ethan. Ethan, as I'm sure tons of people know Ethan, he's moving to Pittsburgh.
the newest Pittsburgh slackliner, the Greenhorn, fresh meat.
Yeah, fresh meat that's bringing his 2,000 plus feet of webbing.
And he's got a great futon.
That's right, you helped him move. Oh, man.
Definitely some really good points on what's your why. For me, to just wrap it up briefly, I've been slacklining for a while and kind of witnessed my own progression, and I feel like my favorite part of slacklining was literally the act of progressing, and like that can happen really fast and exponentially as you get better, and there's like inevitably a point where you kind of plateau, and so you can almost like live vicariously through other people if you kind of facilitate that progression, and you can kind of see them start to like exponentially grow. And Sean Hankins said it really well. It for me at least is like it is a really selfless selfishness because it brings me a lot of joy, but also brings other people joy. So I think that what you guys said really, really wraps that up.
I
quite well.
love Andy Lewis's quote from Lines Without Limits, and it's the other side of that sentiment. If you are acting that way and you like to support people and see their progress from their side of things, I mean, it's incredible. And Andy's quote from Lines Without Limits is like, it's all it takes is that one friend to be like, "You got it, bro," and you're out there and you're like, you know, I do got it, and you do it. You do the thing, right? It's incredible how that support builds you into just this stronger person.
Amazing. What the incredible things can be had from walking on some rope between trees. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Well, we've got 3 minutes left if we want them, or we can leave early. How are we feeling? What's the general feels? This has been amazing so far. Thank you guys so much. Can't say that enough.
I mean, if anyone has questions, like, please ask. Love to help and answer in any way that we can.
What's the most ideal way for someone after this pulse to reach out to you three? Is it on Facebook or Instagram or what's up?
Slacklinepittsburgh.com. No, slacklinepittsburgh.com.
There you go,
there,
that too.
you're going to find all of us.
Okay, there you go. I'll get it up on screen in a second here. I hope I didn't misspell it.
Yeah, that's it.
And that is a Facebook group. So just join it and ask your question or look for us there. We're all a part of that group there too.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you guys so much. This has literally been incredible. I had so much fun. This has been a Breathe Pulse. We have them every Wednesday. We missed last week's. If you have a good pulse idea, reach out to me and we'll make it happen. I would love to live vicariously through you and watch your progression grow and as to whatever field you're teaching in. We have a front split pulse coming up, which could be interesting for those inclined to learn about front splits. All kinds of stuff going on. Any words for your fans, boys, before we depart?
I just want to
Consider
thank
the
everyone.
impossible.
Yeah, that too. As said by the guy who highlines with hunting rifles and teacups in a horse mask. but just thank you everyone for watching, and we really appreciate you taking your time to listen to us. Hopefully, productively ramble for an hour.
And come to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, come visit us.
We'll show you a good time.
There we go. That's it for this week. We will see you guys next week. This has been a Breathe Pulse. Breathe Heart. Wait, there it is. Bye, y'all.